panelist here, because Annette, you just spoke about 1 million children are malnourished in the country. Of course, the story says that 24% of families in Kilifi are in that situation of malnutrition. And you look at the gentleman from the USAID, they are saying that they've set aside some $376 million. That's about 45 billion shillings. So really, there's quite a lot of resources that are being channeled to these interventions. Yes, not enough. The country is big and it's worsening. But on that question of food insecurity, the portions that are being distributed, how much are we doing that we still have these gaps in the situation that you find there of Moses Jackson, an 8-year-old pupil who has had no food for a couple of meals?
A lot is being done, but it is not enough. It is not enough at all. Like you've seen the situation of that young boy, very saddening. And there are many boys, many girls like that, who are missing school, who are going to school, you know, on an empty stomach. We're having children who are now even being exposed to violence, to gender-based violence, to other compounding risks. Their future is actually being affected because they are missing school or they're not even concentrating. So the situation is not good at all. A lot of resources have been put on the table. The USAID, for example, has funded the Kenya Red Cross, and you've seen they've funded several other organizations to support the communities. But what we have in terms of investment in the immediate life-saving needs, but also in the general food security needs, is not enough. So we need more Kenyans, we need more corporates, we need more local organizations, we need even international donors, and we need the government, all of us together, to put in more resources to ensure that we can touch each and every child in the country. I know a lot of the efforts and a lot of focus has been on the worst affected counties, but we cannot afford to focus only on those ones, because you have the ones that are in the alarm phase. And it's good to focus there because they're in the worst situation. But there are those that are in alert phase. Even there, children are struggling. I was in Narok, actually, on Saturday, doing some relief distribution. The situation looked slightly better than what I saw in Marsabit about 3 weeks ago. But that child in Narok, they are not in the alarm phase, but they're still in a bad situation. They need to be given all their attention. So really, my call would be that we need to have more Kenyans, all the different institutions focusing their attention and putting resources now. Otherwise, we will get into a very bad situation.
And Amos, I bet you would know, because you may have witnessed the flagging off of relief food, whatever intervention is coming from different partners. So when this food is getting to the targeted persons, would you know the portions, what it entails in terms of the variety, so that you'd say that food is getting out there, but still malnourishment is an issue, the nutritional value is not as sufficient? Would you know how much an individual, a family, a household would get in terms of a portion and for how long it would last them?
Yeah, usually we look at the relief supplies in terms of the food basket. And the food basket would usually consist of cereals, pulses. Pulses, those are beans, maybe grams, something like that. And then cooking oil. And when you look at the conventional approach, is you decide whether you are giving 100% food basket, 75% food basket, 50% food basket, depending on the drought situation. Because again, in principle, when you do response, you still want to retain the dignity of the household to be able to fend for themselves. And that is the essence of generally not providing 100% of the food basket. So at the moment, we have been operating at 75% of the food basket. So whatever the household receives should ideally last them a month. And where it is being delivered by other agencies. Again, that also is informed by their own internal policies and their success in resource mobilization. Because if they are able to resource mobilize more, then chances are they will cover a bigger fraction of the food basket. We want also to appreciate the fact that the interventions that are taking place progressively require to be scaled up. So whatever has been covered in the past was planned for the situation as it was then.
Right.
And as the drought gets worse, then more and more areas require attention, more and more people require attention. So it will always seem like the numbers being covered are not really the entire number that deserves assistance at that moment. And drought, unlike other hazards, requires that you start intervening at alert. And that is why my sister here indicated that you don't have to wait until the counties get to alarm. The whole essence why we have an early warning system for drought is to enable interventions, activation of contingency plans. Immediately we slide from normal to alert.
Right.
And as we speak now, while we have always been focusing on the traditional arid and semi-arid counties in Kenya, 9 other counties that are not traditionally in the arid and semi-arid regions of this country are also in drought. So while we are talking about 4.35 million people in arid and semi-arid counties that require food assistance, then we also have over 800,000 in these other 9 counties, including Murang'a, Kirinyaga, Kiambu, Machakos, Homa Bay, Migori, Nakuru, Elgeyo Marakwet, and Siaya. And you see those are new numbers coming onto the table and they require attention. And for them, they are at drought alert. We delay intervening. By the time we get to drought alarm in those counties, then the numbers will be much bigger than that. So essentially what we are saying is it's very good that different stakeholders, government and state, have really come on board, mobilized resources and deployed these resources for drought response, attending to food insecurity issues. But then we require to resource mobilize even more because the numbers will continue increasing. Remember, this season, if it fails as forecast, then we are going into January to March. We don't expect rains in January to March usually. Right. So then we will be in a crisis.
But Amos, how efficient is the system and how would one explain the situation that Moses Jackson is in? Is it that he's not been caught in the targeted net, or why is he like that if interventions have been going on?
Yeah, what I'm saying is the numbers that have been reached do not necessarily cover the entire number that is in need. And what it means is the resources that have been deployed are not adequate to adequately address the food insecurity for all the deserving cases.
Right.
And that is why I'm saying that we require to even redouble efforts to mobilize the resources for relief food, because for all the counties that are in drought alarm, Kilifi is not in drought alarm as we speak. It's a drought alert. That's mild drought. So for all the counties that are in alarm, chances are, if the situation worsens, they are going to emergency. Where everything else stops, you have to save lives of human beings. Right. And then for Kilifi, probably going forward, they might slide to alarm. So the numbers will also be increasing. So essentially what we are saying, we have a problem with us that we must be dealt with. And all it requires is resource mobilization and deployment.
Okay. Yeah. Mheshimiwa, so there are different interventions. Relief food can be distributed, like what's happening. There can also be cash transfer from different agencies, including the government. For you, from your experience, what works best to, especially those persons that are in the remote areas and the worst affected? Is it the relief food? Is it the cash transfer? And whichever option, when is the best time to do that? Because it's a question of access to food, but also affordability.
Thank you. When we were growing up, of course, relief food was the best way. Although even that time, you know, the process is or has not been that friendly. Because if you are like now, politicians like me, if the food can be channeled through us, you know, you have to form a committee at every levels. And at every level, the food, you know, goes through. Of course, something happens. And by the time it reaches the person on the ground, maybe even the quantity is not what is expected. And sometimes you find the same food even in the market, and they end up selling. So in order to avoid all that, in our today's Kenya, I will always advocate for cash transfer, because the cash that can easily reach you wherever you are. And you can rush to the market and buy whatever you want to buy for your family. And if you get 5,000, the 5,000, if it gets to the hand of a woman or the mother, then she can easily go and shop for the family and get whatever they need. While if you are distributing food, maybe what they can be given is just maize, minus even beans or even cooking fat. So if you give money, that can serve better. But again, from yesterday, I think that has also, we have a challenge because all the SIM cards, you know, and registered have been disconnected. So we are in another crisis. But I will always advocate for cash transfer, because it gets from the source to the beneficiary, and it benefits the beneficiaries in a better way. But even in that, we have to be careful, because if the same people who have their own relatives, who favor their own people, or political, you know, followers, and leave others, because if you go to the ground, there are a lot of dynamics, and people do different things in order to please different people. So if we can be genuine in what we are doing, we identify the most needy people and get the cash to them as soon as possible, then they can also buy food for themselves and get what they need as a family.
Right. Okay, I'll get to you. Let's first listen to some voices here on the situation as it is, but also the intervention that was flagged off by the Deputy President's spouse, one Mrs. Gachagua. Watch.
Only early this year, we were speaking of 3 million people affected. But now, that number stands at over 4 million. This number could rise to 4.5 million by the end of the year, given that the October, November, December rains are projected to be inadequate. As the drought continues to intensify, the needs of the community continue to increase. People need food, water, and health services, among others. However, the effects go beyond sleeping hungry. Also supporting rehabilitation of strategic water sources, and have partnered with the Kenya Meat Commission to buy and slaughter livestock under the offtake program. Over 300,000 people have benefited from this program.
Haba na haba ujaza kibaba. You just need that 1 shilling, donate it even to the Red Cross, whatever the account, and those many shillings will make millions that will be able to make a difference.
All right, that is Dorcas Gachagua, the spouse of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, and earlier on was Dr. Asha Mohammed, the Secretary General of the Kenya Red Cross. And I wanted to, just before I give an opportunity, Amos, I wanted to ask you a question, Annette, here, because the 1 million children that you say are in that phase of malnutrition, so when you're intervening, what sort of care do you give so that you can, should I say, restore, but also help them to the path of recovery?
Okay. With the children and the pregnant and lactating mothers who are at very high risk of malnutrition, one of the things that we do together with them is something we call Family MUAC, which is it's a community screening approach where the mothers are trained and supported to be able to monitor their children on a very regular basis so that they ensure the children do not slide into malnutrition, or if they are sliding towards malnutrition, they are able to seek assistance. We have been working together with the Ministry of Health and with support from UNICEF to distribute ready-to-use therapeutic feeds, what we call RUTF. So we conduct integrated medical and nutrition outreaches every 2 weeks in all these counties, and we monitor the children's progress, and we are able then to put them onto the program so that they take these therapeutic feeds and they're able to recover, and for those who are at risk, then they do not slide into that. So that is one very specific intervention targeting the children and pregnant and lactating mothers. But also, as we are doing the food distribution, whether we are doing cash transfer program, we do targeting, working together with the communities, the community leadership, the county leadership. We target the most vulnerable households. And of course, vulnerability has different criteria. For example, households with children under 5, households with the pregnant and lactating mothers, households with the persons who have terminal illnesses, households with persons who are very old, persons who live with disability and would be disadvantaged. So then these are the persons who are prioritized even in providing the other general support of cash transfer, of food distribution, etc. Then it allows the different categories of those vulnerable ones to be supported.
And for you to slide into malnutrition, so you've had food that is deficient of the nutritional value, or you have missed meals for what period of time, would you say?
Well, I wouldn't talk about the period of time. It's just the body system, the way it digresses or the way it deteriorates. Yes, there are particular measures that you look at that the medical persons would be best placed to speak about, but there are criteria that they look at.
Okay, all right. Amos, you wanted to say something to the earlier conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to make a contribution to what Mheshimiwa was mentioning, preference of cash transfers over food in kind. Of course, in terms of logistics and convenience, cash transfers are perfect, and also even in terms of ensuring that that gets to the targeted beneficiary household. But then there could be cases where the market function has been severely compromised, such that even if you were to avail support in cash, then probably they will still have to send for food from Nairobi. In which case then you may consider some sort of hybrid where cash transfers work and the market is functioning, then you can do that. But where evidence on the market function indicates that it is not practical to do cash transfers and expect them to really buy food at the local markets, then sometimes it may be necessary to do actual relief food interventions. I also wanted to add to the fact that we've been going through a transition. We just had elections the other day. The new county governments are actually settling into office. Fortunately, it's generally at the beginning of the financial year. And we expect that the new county governments will also play their role as the first responders. And this is because they are expected to use 2% of their county revenues for emergency response. And for us, I think there is no other emergency as a country that we need really to deal with other than the drought problems that we are having.
Right.
And with that, then probably we will be able to reach the boys like Jackson that we saw from Kilifi, because the county government must actually demonstrate that they have exhausted their 2% meant for emergency interventions.
Right.
And then we also now need to appreciate the fact that, again, nationally, we have to deliberately reorganize allocations in a manner that we give more prominence to response at this time. Because really, what matters now is how quickly we are able to move to save lives and livelihoods.
Right.
We want to appreciate different partners, different stakeholders that have done their bit. Red Cross have done their bit. Safaricom Foundation have done their bit. Several other organizations have come in a strong way. But then the problem is growing bigger, and we need to continue mobilizing and taking action.
Tell me, when you look at the cash transfer allocations that you may have and are being distributed to the people, how much would a household get over what period of time?
The government rates that have been operating up to now are in the range of 2,700 to 3,000, which, looking at how the cost of per month, when you look at how the costs of commodities have increased, probably that may be, the value of that may have been eroded so much. But we also have seen non-state actors dispensing up to 8,000, 5,000, 8,000 per month. And with that kind of cash transfer, then we are able to have some sort of cushion for the households. In terms of targeting of beneficiaries, I think it is important to mention the single registry arrangements, where the National Drought Management Authority, of course, as part of government, has been able to establish an enhanced single registry, which is currently operational in the counties that are implementing the Hunger Safety Net program. Marsabit is one of them. Turkana, Wajir, Mandera. And the same is being expanded to Garissa, Tana River, Isiolo, and Samburu. And it has infrastructure that enables targeting of the most vulnerable. Because what it has done is it has arranged the households in each county in a hierarchical manner in terms of wealth endowment. So when it comes to targeting, it provides an opportunity to target. And once a household has benefited, then they cannot benefit twice in the same month. And this is a structure an infrastructure that should be adopted across the counties that are facing this drought crisis, so that even as we talk about cash transfers, yes, it has also the ability to support other interventions, including relief food. Because all it requires is to register that intervention, and you are given the priority beneficiaries, ranked and actually verified by the community.
All right, I hear you. A very important comment there. I'm just wondering, with 2,700, 3,000 shillings, of course, in Nairobi can get you much. I'm just wondering what it would do in those areas. Let's take a look at the feedback that is coming from our viewers at Citizen TV Kenya. At Sam Gichuku, the hashtag to use is Daybreak, on your views about the situation in the country. And as you can hear from the panelists here, it is getting worse, and it's getting to areas that have not been in this bracket recently. Bob Otieno, you're saying that realization of Vision 2030 will be a daunting task as we are still experiencing tears of hunger. Food security should have been a thing of the past in this era. I bet you mean that should have been emphasized way before. Someone else? This is LJ Sindani. The problem with the recurring drought situation is that we are more reactive than proactive. We wait until the drought situation gets out of hand. That's when we react to it. I'm sure the panelists would disagree with you, some of them, especially those that know what has been going on. Godi Baraza Were, Ruto's presidency must critically focus on ensuring that counties in the drought zones are availed with water. Arol, Kimorel, Thoke, Thiba dams and the unexplored aquifer in Turkana must be activated for credible drought mitigation process. Bob Otieno again, national government should work closely with drought crisis affected counties, not only for food distribution, but now to cushion or have a long-term solution of food production. And then Engineer Lazaro, you're saying the drought situation in Northern Frontier needs serious attention. Government should start working on long-term solutions such as drilling boreholes, irrigation. Time is ripe for Ruto to implement his campaign pledges. And that's what I want us to focus on in terms of focusing on the long-term solutions. Like you said earlier on, yes, President William Ruto, what did I just do? President William Ruto, who has been in office for 34 days now, was in Kirinyaga and, of course, was witnessing the commissioning of Thiba Dam, saying that it's going to increase the acreage that is under cultivation, that is via irrigation, by 10,000, I believe. And, of course, talking about one of the solutions to food insecurity is through subsidized fertilizer, but also the GMO technology, whose ban was lifted by the cabinet earlier this month. And Mheshimiwa Wako, let's get into this, because you come from Marsabit, one of the affected counties. Actually, it's one of those that are in the alarm. What would you think is the sustainable solution to that area, knowing that basically, yes, there's a bit of farming, but majorly pastoralism. So what for you would be the long-term solution that is sustainable?
I will disclose the discussion we had with the president, with our current president, just some few days ago, concerning the situation on the ground. And he has good plans, and he said water. Of course, we told him water, water, water. If we get water, then we'll have solved 80% of our problem. And he agreed with us, and he said that we can think of 3, 4 to even 5 big dams. Already there are few dams that have been, people have been working on. But he said with 4 or 5 dams, then we can reduce our challenges. It is hard to get a pastoralist out of pastoralism, because that is what they are used to, and they have no alternative. But getting them out of that may not be the best strategy at the moment, but enhancing what they are doing. Once we get out of this drought, and then we have water in place, then we buy few animals and get them back to their life, then we can start planning from there. And for those people who can do farming, like in Marsabit, and there we have few areas that people can do farming, those ones can also be, we can also enhance what they are doing so that food production can go up. When we were young, I remember, I come from Marsabit, Saku area, where we do a bit of planting and we do a bit of farming. We used to, others from other areas used to come to our places and get food. So if we can enhance and we can also grow those who are doing farming in Marsabit and Saku and other few areas, so that food production can go up. And then with the dams now, the animals can get enough water, and a bit of irrigation can also be done, because that is in the president's plan. And he said he's focusing, he already has people in mind who can partner with us and bring that problem, give us a solution for that problem. But again, at this particular time when we are starving and dying, the best thing is to see how we can get water to the people, because many people go for almost 20 kilometers to get 20 liters of water. The animals are dying mainly because of lack of water. So if we can focus on getting water to people, getting food to people at the moment, and then we plan now, from now on, so that we can reduce the challenges we are going through and the challenges we have been going through in the past, then we can have a bright future.
And Amos, given the cultural realities that she's talking about, what is the better model so that, in a way that makes farming a lucrative venture for even people who are not necessarily from that region, so that there's food available for people there who can access it?
I like the fact that the new administration of His Excellency President William Ruto is speaking of subsidizing production. Mm-hmm. And subsidizing production should extend to subsidizing technology that helps us to produce. In these arid and semi-arid counties, as I indicated earlier, the issue is lack of water. So then we require to invest in technologies that help us manage the little water that we get, mm-hmm. be it for crop production or livestock production. And that means we need really to get incentives that encourage water-efficient technologies in those areas, mm-hmm. and then also promotion of water-efficient crop species for areas that we say are can do marginal farming, marginal agriculture. But then we also need to commercialize livestock production in these places, mm-hmm. because I think, and this is my view, and it could be shared by a number of experts, livestock keeping in this country, especially in the arid and semi-arid counties, is largely sentimental. People are satisfied with numbers. Mm-hmm. They want to see very many animals. And I remember when I worked in Pokot, mm-hmm. the honor that an elder can be given is to be given a name of his favorite bull. Mm-hmm. And when it gets to that kind of attachment to livestock, then the prudence of having to destock when there is risk of drought is lost. We need really to sensitize and educate our communities to be able to appreciate that what belongs to you when it is animals, it's what you've sold, is in your pocket, mm-hmm. or what you've eaten. The rest will be taken away by drought, by disease, or by rustlers. Mm-hmm. And the moment we start commercializing livestock production in these counties, then we will start seeing sustainable numbers of livestock being retained, which will not be outstripping the carrying capacity of the land. Mm-hmm. Because essentially what we are having is overstocking, overgrazing, undermining the resource base that is supposed to support livestock production in these counties. And then we also need to look at ecosystem management programs, right. that support regeneration, conservation, and protection of the rangelands. Because one, these rangelands start with a disadvantage of low rains. Because on average, we are talking about less than 500 millimeters of rainfall per year. Subject that to any little shock and overgrazing, then we are creating a desert. And until we start addressing that from that point, then we may not go far. There is also the other dimension. Mm-hmm. Climate change is real. Most of the vagaries that we are facing now are the consequences of climate change. That's why Mheshimiwa here was saying that the frequency of droughts back then was much less than it is now. Actually, where we have gotten is where we are jumping from a drought into a drought. If you are lucky, you only have rains for one season, mm-hmm. and then you are back into a drought. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we are no longer able to sustain the kind of cycles, the climatic cycles that were there. They have been disrupted because of climate change, and we require now to start thinking climate smart. We want to start thinking of how we make a contribution to carbon sequestration, mm-hmm. the creation of carbon sinks. And for me, these rangelands in the arid and semi-arid counties give us the greatest potential to create carbon sinks. And all we require are deliberate programs to help these communities see opportunity for revenue, mm-hmm. from carbon trade. Right. And that will spur regeneration of these rangelands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Annette, as you come to the end of the conversation, because again, like they say, the contextual realities on the ground, there are people that, because of what they've known all their lives, it may be difficult to change their culture from pastoralism to crop cultivation. But then again, Kenyans still remember what may have happened. Which year was it? The Kenyans for Kenya.
Yeah.
How much of an impact did it have being launched or implemented in Turkana? How much of an impact did it have in changing the thinking of the local community? And is it something that can be replicated in these other parts?
I think the first and most important thing is to recognize the local communities, their realities, their preferences, their culture, their way of being, and then use that as an entry point. I don't think we need to change what they're doing, but we need to work with them, empower them to see where they themselves can actually adjust. And this is done by just allowing them, facilitating them to be at the forefront. Many a times, experts will come from outside and say, this has worked in Turkana, this has worked in Israel. Every time there's a drought, you hear Kenyans saying, Egypt and Israel are doing 1, 2, 3, why don't we do it here? But then, you know, coming in and replicating from others sometimes can make things fail. But if you allow the communities themselves to appreciate what works well for them, what does not work for them, share with them experiences from elsewhere, invite them to take the leadership in those adjustments, not necessarily to change. You don't want to say because your pastoralist agriculture, farming is better. If you do that, it will fail. But empowering them to make the decisions themselves and say, how do we diversify our own livelihoods mechanisms? How can I maybe do partly pastoralism, partly agriculture? I have seen it working in Turkana, for example. They adopt it themselves, then it can work. That for me is what I would say.
You did want to tell me about the lessons from Kenyans for Kenya and the impact to the local community?
The lessons from that are really linked to what I'm just saying. I mean, during the Kenyans for Kenya, there are several projects that were launched, and there are some that worked very well, and the communities continue to enjoy the benefits, and there are areas where it worked for a little time and then the community did not continue with it. So for me, then the lesson is ensure thorough involvement of the communities, empower them, let them take the leadership, let the counties also take the leadership so that even as an external institution, when you hand it over to the community, then they are able to own it. Okay. Yeah, I think that's how I would put it.
Thank you so much. Annette Msabeni from the Kenya Red Cross, that is the Deputy Secretary General, Amos Nyakeo, an Assistant Director at the NDMA, and Naomi Wako, the Woman Representative for Marsabit. Thank you all for making time for us to have this conversation. And of course, we don't have the solutions here. We're just trying to understand the situation and look at what can be done, probably to make it better, especially for Moses Jackson, whose story aired last night, and of course, again this morning, an 8-year-old boy in Ganze, Kilifi County, who hasn't had a meal for a couple of days, and of course, the impact is real, not able to concentrate. And this is what we're talking about, because sometimes people may forget it is in the basics that Kenyans are suffering. Thank you for making time for us, and we want to take a short break here. When we come back, we'll be speaking to Bishop Oginde and Nancy Oginde about matters leadership. Stay tuned.